Crowdfunding for GoldenFox Pictures is supported by my patrons, including Science Steel Rail, Jack Foley, Courtney Bright, and Thomas Fan 3751. Thank you all for your support, and to all my viewers, I hope you enjoy this video.
Going for the hard deck. Let's get down there first and nail him, Mav.
No way, Jester. You're mine.
Rooting back to my younger years, Top Gun was one of those movies I enjoyed watching all the way up to my adulthood. There was always something magical about it. Maybe it was just the nostalgia behind it, or the thrill and experience of watching planes take off. At some point, I grew a fascination with aircrafts to where I used to own some toy planes and use the underside of my bed as a hangar. Not to mention, the movie was also loved by my family a lot. My aunt even once told me that it was one of the best movies that she's seen. As time went by, however, I discovered that the movie was not as well praised by the critics, and some people even stated it was overrated. But does that take away any enjoyment I have for this movie? Of course not. The movie was directed by Tony Scott, who was formerly Ridley's brother until he unfortunately passed on in 2012 by suicide. He would later direct films such as Enemy of the State, Domino, and Unstoppable. The thing I've always noticed with Tony's work is how much style he puts into them, most notably attempting to be hip and energetic with modern audiences. Top Gun is easily no exception, as both the cinematography and the soundtrack does its job even over its own narrative. That can be for better and for worse. At its surface, the plot is a formula of a rookie hotshot who wants to be the best. That someone is Pete Mitchell, whose call sign is Maverick, played by Tom Cruise. Both him and his friend Goose are sent to a flight academy named Top Gun, as the movie refers, and they are to be trained by some of the world's greatest fighter pilots. As you guessed it, Maverick becomes a show-off with a very competitive and rebellious attitude, most notably between him and Iceman, played by Val Kilmer. Now, because the movie has a very familiar and simple story, most of what is past the surface is easily to be glossed over. It's easy to see why, since a story that has been done by the book is more often looked down on. However, I've stated before that a familiar formula doesn't automatically devalue a story by default. There have been several movies that have been looked at with high praises, and most have had familiar formulas before. Most people forget that the important aspect about storytelling is execution. Since Top Gun is presented being hip with its viewers, it can throw some people off. That's the big price of making a film that is style over substance. On the contrary, because the story is familiar, it helps keep its pacing smooth and the style very exciting. Seeing where the movie can go and where you can predict, it's all a matter of how much you're going to be challenged with the characters. In Maverick's case, he's confronted with his reputation in the Navy by his family history. It's mentioned very, very minimally, and it's very vague as his father's history is considered classified. His competitive and rebellious behavior roots down to this, as he's desperate to bring a better image out of his father's expense. This gets to him so much at one point that it eventually comes at the cost of Goose's life. After getting caught in a jet wash, Goose is killed during ejection after exhausting all options to recover from a flat spin. Iceman is additionally responsible for cutting off Maverick during the mission, but Maverick's left in utter guilt to rethink his actions. This is where the movie gets more credit from me than what most people do. Before the incident happens, it's revealed that Goose has a family, and a very happy one at that. Because of this, the guilt Maverick has on his shoulders becomes heavier, as it plays a role in what consequences you have to be ready for when being a pilot. Adding more weight to the subject, one pilot in the beginning of the movie named Cougar was having a meltdown when he needed to return to base. Part of which is because he's a father and has too big of a risk for his life proceeding on his career. So when Goose is dead, it doesn't just affect Maverick, but also those around him. One scene that I have to give credit to is when Maverick and Goose's wife interact with each other over their mourn. I normally would have expected her to yell or scream at him out of anger, but she sees the guilt and loss in him. She's fully aware of how good friends he and Goose were, making this moment genuine. So Maverick is not just any cocky character. He's someone who puts on a face attempt to get far until he has to confront humility.
The simple fact is you feel responsible for Goose, and you have a confidence problem.
The unfortunate side to this is that his actual problem is downplayed so much to where you can hardly notice it. His cocky personality was so upfront that anything else about his character was overlooked and cited as a generic character and a generic popcorn flick with style. Now, saying this doesn't devalue what everyone else thinks, nor do I say that this movie is deep and meaningful. Just something a little more that I looked at than what is quintessential about a movie's formula. Midway in the film, there's a romance developed between him and a flight instructor named Charlotte Blackwood with the call sign Charlie, and the moments between these two are very shoehorned and cheesy. It's tolerable to watch, don't get me wrong, and it does do its favors for Maverick's character where he elaborates what he knows about his father. But after a while, I was getting tired of seeing these two interact as Berlin's Take My Breath Away was played endlessly. The movie never stopped playing that. It was more played than the rest of the iconic tracks, including the Top Gun anthem. I don't hate this song by any means, but repeating the same track under 30 minutes can get me exhausted. Finishing up what's left in the movie is both the soundtrack and the gorgeous cinematography. Both of these shine the most as they provide the style and execution. Everything is beautifully shot with all the aerial flights and dogfight sequences. Having close shots of the warplanes both in the cockpits and in midair is not easy to do. Not to mention the crew had to invest a lot of money from government officials to get these planes. And then the soundtrack nails the excitement overall. The opening scene alone gets me fired up as I watch the marshals prepare takeoff at the hangar and hearing the roaring sounds of the F-14's takeoff on the runway. Adding to that, Kenny Loggins' Danger Zone just cranks it up. The best track, however, has to be the Top Gun anthem, and that's no surprise at all. The melody on the guitar is simple, emotional, and can still grow some hair on my chest. Both Harold Faltermeyer and Steve Stevens did a fantastic job with this composition, and very rightfully it won its own Grammy Award in 1987. To this day, it still gives me goosebumps whenever I listen to this track. Needless to say, I'm easily entertained with this movie. It could once again be my nostalgia as there have been several memorable moments, whether it's pulling a flyby stunt, flipping off an enemy in an inverted dive, playing volleyball, or singing Great Balls of Fire. But personally, I still think it's a good movie. It is just as important to acknowledge its flaws, and I am aware that it has a mildly bitter reputation and isn't as beloved. A lot of people don't like this movie. I understand that. It's not a movie I would recommend for everyone either. But if given the chance to see it, at least I hope you enjoy it. For me, this movie will give me the fun experience over time as well as the rest of my family and will forever hold a place in the heart of my childhood. To the final rating, I give Top Gun a 4 out of 5 stars. Thank you for watching. This is GoldenFox, and happy 4th of July.